I want to first note that there are going to be spoilers for all 5 seasons of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power in this video. This is my first video essay, and I don't plan on making lots of these. This channel is mainly for mountain videos. My background is in mathematical physics, not film or storytelling, so I may not be qualified for this. But this is YouTube, and basically anything goes here. I just really love this show, and I feel like there are a lot of different perspectives on Catra, specifically on what happened to her in Season 5, and I am here to give my opinion, which is a bit different compared to a lot of the other opinions out there. This is my interpretation of the show, and it will probably not be the same as your interpretation, or as the makers of the show intended it to be interpreted, so feel free to tell me why you disagree with my points, or ask me to elaborate on my points more in the comments. I think that there's a lot that can be learned from this show, and I welcome your insight. Catra, in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, acted as the main villain in the first 4 seasons of the show, before joining the princesses and becoming one of the heroes in the 5th and final season. Viewers of the show display quite a bit of controversy as to whether Catra's redemption arc was well written or poorly written. After rewatching the show multiple times and contemplating Catra's arc, I have come to the conclusion that Catra's arc is written in a fashion that is consistent with the characters of the show. But I am under the current impression that Catra's arc is not actually a redemption arc at all. I want to first note that redemption is a subjective matter. I think that redemption can only be obtained when someone has done something that was morally wrong with unjustifiable motivation. As different people have different morals, the morally wrong part and the unjustifiable motivation part of this is subjective. If people do things that you view as morally wrong, but they have justifiable motivation, then I think that they need to be understood, not redeemed. If you see their side of the story, and what they did made sense, are you really going to ask them to change things in the future? You might if the change is easy to implement and doesn't have much of an impact on the person, but if it does have an impact, then you may be being selfish, asking for the change. Throughout the first 4 seasons of the show, Catra has certainly done things that I believe are morally wrong, but I think that Catra is justified in her actions. Given how resilient Catra is, I don't think many people could say that they would act differently in the situations that she found herself in with the same upbringing. To show why I think that Catra's actions are justified, I will go through the first 4 seasons of She-Ra, where Catra did most of her damage, and explain the reasoning behind Catra's actions. In Season 1, Episode 2, The Sword Part 2, Adora offers Catra the chance to leave the Horde with her, claiming that the Horde is evil, and what they were doing was wrong. Catra does not join Adora because Catra refuses to believe that Adora was that stupid. Adora has watched Catra get abused by Shadow Weaver her whole life, so in Catra's mind, there is no good explanation that Adora should just now be figuring out that the Horde is evil. She has had plenty of time to witness it. So Catra thinks that Adora is crazy to be trying to leave the Horde. She electrocutes Adora. Adora is not acting as she should, and Catra doesn't want Adora to do something crazy. Adora is shown to do the same thing when Catra does not seem to be acting as she should in Season 3, Episode 5, Remember. And this electrocution was in fact much more powerful as Catra passed out. A point can be made that if Catra has known that the Horde was evil this whole time, then she should have made the decision to leave the Horde before Adora did. As we see throughout the first season though, Catra has only ever known physical and mental abuse. Adora was the only good thing in her life, but even Adora did not respect Catra, as she constantly downplayed Catra's competency in Season 1, Episode 11, Promise. Catra didn't have the luxury to think big picture, because she was just trying to survive, and she probably didn't have a strong self-image that would allow her to make a big decision like that, since no one had any respect for her. Before Adora left the Horde, she was Catra's safety, and when she left, Catra had no safety. Over the next couple of episodes, we see Catra take the wrath of Shadow Weaver, as Shadow Weaver blames Catra for losing Adora. Catra is still trying to protect Adora, because she thinks that Adora will snap out of this decision and come back to the Horde. By Season 1, Episode 5, The Sea Gate, Catra realizes that Adora has left her for good. Catra is now upset, and she lashes out and claws at Adora in She-Ra form. This is not great, but She-Ra is very powerful, and it takes a lot for her to get hurt. Catra knows this, which is the reason she uses claws. Catra only ever tries to claw at Adora when she is not in She-Ra form, in the alternate reality episodes, and when she is chipped. When Catra is not being controlled or under a psychotic break, she never tries to inflict serious pain on Adora. At this point, Catra no longer has Adora, which means that she has lost her only sense of worth, as we see in Season 1, Episode 11, Promise, that Adora liking Catra was Catra's only sense of worth, as designed by Shadow Weaver. But since Catra has been promoted to Force Captain, she is beginning to realize that she may be able to gain worth by showing competency as a Force Captain. This is motivated as Shadow Weaver showed Adora conditional love, and Catra thinks that she may be able to have conditional love as well if she is a good Force Captain. So Catra decides to try something at the All-Princess Ball. This is the first time where Catra is really doing work for the Horde. She hasn't been sent out on a mission to bring Adora back. She's trying to give the Horde an advantage in the fight. However, Catra's reasoning for doing this is not sinister, as I already discussed. Catra is not trying to hurt the rebellion, she is just trying to obtain conditional love from Shadow Weaver, or some recognition from Hordak. I am now going to look into Catra's plan at the All-Princess Ball in more depth. Catra's plan was to kidnap Glimmer and Bow, so that Queen Angela would be forced to give herself up, effectively ending the war. Now this is not great for Bow, Glimmer, or Angela. However, this plan only involves 3 people getting hurt, and could potentially end the war, had Catra not helped Adora and Glimmer ultimately escape the Fright Zone. The idea, though, is that this was an essentially non-violent approach to end a war. Even in Catra's execution, she has to fight Adora, and she never tries more than bumping into her. She even saves Adora from jumping off a cliff, a favor which Adora returns quickly and is played as a big moment, because it is very difficult for Adora to see past what she believes is morally correct, and she sees Catra as the enemy. Catra saving Adora from jumping off the same cliff is played off as if it's nothing, because of course Catra cares about Adora still. Adora was Catra's only sense of comfort for so many years. This is not big news. Catra's next big moment where she does something that would be considered morally incorrect is in Season 1, Episode 11, Promise, where she leaves Adora hanging off the edge of a cliff. This is a huge moment in the show. In Season 1, Episode 9, No Princess Left Behind, Catra helps Adora escape after she realizes that Shadow Weaver was just going to give Adora Force Captain again. Catra needs Adora gone, so that she can try to gain some worth from Hordak and Shadow Weaver. Then throughout Episode 11, Catra realizes that Adora doesn't respect her, and she sees externally that her entire worth was tied to Adora liking her. Adora offers Catra a chance to leave the Horde, but it is now clear that Catra can't do this because it would be admitting that she has no worth beyond an attachment to Adora. After Lighthope shows Catra the memory of the promise, Catra is reminded that Adora left her, breaking the promise and shattering Catra's safety. So Catra leaves Adora hanging off the edge of a cliff. Is this a big deal? Yes, because it is now clear to Catra that she should be looking forward towards a life without Adora to hold her back, and Catra is determined to go down a path that will lead her towards better mental health, which involves cutting her attachment to Adora and Shadow Weaver. And Catra does just that at the end of Episode 11 and in Episode 12, Lighthope, where she breaks Shadow Weaver's connection to the Black Garnet and takes her prisoner. But it is easy to get caught up in the emotion of the music and overplay what Catra has done here. Catra simply left Adora on a cliff which was a hologram, so it may not have actually been a cliff. Furthermore, Adora even said that the spider bots were after Catra, and they would try to stop Adora too, as long as Catra was there. This furthers Adora's safety in the situation. Finally, Catra left Adora on the side of an actual ice cliff in Episode 8, and this was not played off as a big deal. This move from Catra was not so much to hurt Adora, as it was for Catra to symbolically try to move forward. Even in the season finale, Catra says that she fully expected Adora to come out of the situation. At the end of Season 1, Catra surmounts an attack on Bright Moon after strengthening the Black Garnet. The primary goal of this attack is to take out the Moonstone, and the fighting is against the princesses who are resisting. Catra has an individual fight against She-Ra, where Catra goes hard enough to get some scratches in, but still leaves the fight early as she seemed to be merely distracting Adora, as the rest of the Horde could make progress on the Moonstone. This attack isn't great from a moral perspective, but Catra is only trying to win the war so she can gain recognition from Hordak at this point, which would prove that she has worth. You can see how happy she is at the end of the episode when Hordak says that she will have the opportunity to prove her worth to him. Catra still doesn't have the grounding to think about making decisions based on sets of morals. She has made the first step in getting better mental health by trying to distance herself from Adora and Shadow Weaver, but she still must prove her competency. Now Catra is still receiving some form of love though. Unconditional love from Scorpia. The reason why this doesn't give Catra enough of a grounding to make moral decisions about what the Horde is doing is because Catra is trying to fight against her nature to make connections with people, since connecting with Adora caused Adora's betrayal to fuck her up so bad. Season 2 doesn't have Catra doing much evil Horde stuff. It is more character development for Catra. We see that Catra has become friends with Scorpia and Entrapta, and although she enjoys their company and tries to protect them, she doesn't know how to be vulnerable and show that she cares in a direct manner. Catra's fighting in this season comes in Episode 2, Ties That Bind, and Episode 5, Whiteout. Both fights are initiated by the Rebellion, and in the latter fight, Catra was actually working in unoccupied territory. We also see Catra interact with Shadow Weaver, and she tries to save Shadow Weaver from getting sent to Beast Island. But Shadow Weaver uses Catra's love for her to manipulate Catra and to escape. When Hordak finds out that Catra lost Shadow Weaver, he suffocates her and takes her prisoner. Into Season 3 now, Catra is sent to die in the Crimson Waste. She tries to save Scorpia from the same fate, but Scorpia won't listen. Catra actually seems really annoyed with Scorpia here, and with Scorpia and Entrapta throughout Season 2 and Season 3 in general. But it is seen that when Catra is being mean to them, it is to try to protect them. She tries to protect Entrapta from getting hurt by Hordak by yelling at her in Season 2, Episode 3, Signals. She is constantly upset in Season 2, Episode 5, Whiteout, but at the end of the episode, we see that it is because of the punishment that they would face coming back empty-handed, and when Entrapta shows that they got the first one's tech, Catra is actually happy for the extra time that they got to spend together. In Season 3, Episode 1, The Price of Power, Catra calls for guards to force Scorpia away so that she couldn't be dragged down with Catra. So in the Crimson Waste, when Catra acts annoyed with Scorpia initially, it's because she doesn't want Scorpia to throw her life away with Catra. But things don't go as expected, and Catra ends up having a really good time away from the Horde, taking over the Crimson Waste. When Catra captures Adora, something she did quickly and painlessly by the way, Adora reveals to Catra that Shadow Weaver went to Bright Moon. Catra pieces the puzzle together, and she discovers that Shadow Weaver escaped, leaving Catra to die, and after Catra offered her help, all because Shadow Weaver's love for Adora. Catra is destroyed by this, and we see Catra's clear tunnel vision. She must destroy the Rebellion, including Shadow Weaver and Adora. Catra likely doesn't realize the dangers of opening the portal at this point. Because of the tunnel vision, the only information that got through was Shadow Weaver's location. After going back to the Fright Zone, Catra gets to see Shadow Weaver again, where she is reminded of what happened. Immediately after this, she sees Entrapta, who tells her that they actually can't set off the portal. Catra isn't able to interpret this though, as she is so emotionally volatile from her encounter with Shadow Weaver. As soon as Entrapta mentions Adora's name, Catra stops listening to what Entrapta is trying to tell her. So she opens the portal. This is again morally wrong. Catra was given warning about the portal, but Catra was not in any sort of state to be processing this information, so her actions are still justifiable. In the alternate reality, Catra starts to realize that something is wrong after Adora insists that something is in fact wrong. The memories that come back to Catra are the memory of Adora's promise and the memory of Adora leaving Catra. Catra viciously attacks Adora here, but the knowledge that she is working with is the parts of the story that have hurt Catra the most. She doesn't have a fully functioning memory here, so it is difficult to hold much against her. In the following episode, corrupted Catra attacks Adora, and Adora fights back this time, and actually blames Catra for what has happened, saying that it was her choice, and she has to live with it. This was a big step for Adora. And what Adora said is partially true. Catra certainly has to live with the consequences of her actions. However, Catra's choice was pretty directed. If Catra were to make a different decision leading up to this point, she would have to have either had very little care for her own life, or be completely hopeless and therefore non-active. Up until this point, we have seen the reasons that Catra has done the things that she has done. Catra was stripped of the only support that she had. She was abused and tortured, betrayed, and left to die. Catra is trying to survive, and when you are trying to survive, you can't afford to think about others. You have to think about yourself. If this wasn't the case, then organisms would never pass on their genes. The reason that we see Catra's actions as wrong is because we live in a society where people have support mechanisms which allow them to think about things other than survival. The fact that Catra doesn't is overlooked because we are so used to dealing with people that do, and expecting them to be able to consider others. So for Catra to make choices that don't go towards her survival, but towards helping others, is really asking a lot. And it's even harder for Adora in particular to understand this, because Adora is someone who has no concern for her own survival. Adora views herself as a tool to do good for the world, not as a person, so she cannot comprehend Catra's point of view. Early in Season 4, Catra has nightmares about the whole portal incident. Now that she is in a better headspace, she is able to contemplate her actions, and she regrets her decisions. Through the first half of Season 4, Catra tries to shut herself off to Scorpia, as she focuses entirely on her work. She is shutting herself off because of the lessons that she learned from Season 3. Caring about people will get you hurt. This is not a good lesson, but she cared about Shadow Weaver, and that got her an essential death sentence from Hordak, so you can't really blame Catra for this takeaway. She is just learning from her mistakes. Unfortunately, Catra's work is to try to conquer Etheria. At the end of Season 3, Adora made it pretty clear that they are on separate sides of the war, and there is no chance for Catra to leave the Horde now. As Adora said, that Catra made her choice, and she has to live with it. So there is not much else for Catra to do except fight the war. There is no option to leave the Horde. Catra starts winning the war, but she realizes that Scorpia has left the Horde. Catra now realizes that even though Hordak respects her and appreciates her work, she needs Scorpia. She needs friends. At this point, Catra is confused. She tries to reach out to Lonnie, Kyle, and Rogelio, but she tries to protect Scorpia's things also, which escalates into argumentation and what would be fighting if Kyle hadn't stepped in. When she fights Hordak, she tries to reason to herself that she doesn't need anyone. She's stuck between thinking that she needs friends and thinking that friends are a way for her to get hurt. At this point of the story, Catra has done all her bad deeds for the Horde. Catra has reasoning behind her actions up to this point. Under circumstances where Catra had more security and was able to think about people other than herself, Catra's actions would not be justified. But Catra doesn't have this sort of support. She has to look after herself first. That is biology. And up to this point, she has been struggling to survive more than anyone else on the show, while thinking just about herself. So how is she supposed to think about others too? So Season 5 is where Catra is supposed to have the redemption part of her redemption arc. But even this does not seem like a redemption arc, because Catra does not change because she realizes that what she was doing to everyone was bad, and she wants to make up for it. She still can't afford to think about that. Catra changes for essentially selfish reasons, so that she can be a better person and treat her friends better. Catra does eventually act with the intent to help masses of people, but this is only after she has gained enough support in her life for her to not think entirely about herself, and this ties in better with her romance with Adora and understanding Adora's motivations. After realizing the hopelessness of her situation with Horde Prime, in Season 5, Episode 3, Corridors, Catra decides to reflect on her friendship with Adora. For Catra, there is nothing left to live for. She has pushed her friends away, and she can't gain power in Horde Prime's army. She is in a losing situation. But Catra remembers that long ago, she and Adora made a promise to each other, that nothing bad could happen if they looked out for each other. Adora had forgotten that promise, but Catra remembered, and with nothing left to lose, she is able to sacrifice herself to get Glimmer off of Horde Prime's ship so that there is no reason for Adora to go there and get captured. In Season 5, Episode 6, Taking Control, Catra finds herself in a situation that she did not expect to be in. She has been saved, and now she faces the people that she has been fighting for a very long time. Catra has a hard time apologizing to Entrapta and letting her operate on her. Entrapta forgives Catra for sending her to Beast Island, though. Entrapta recently went through an episode where she is confronted with the bad things that she did to the other princesses who considered her a friend. So Entrapta knows that being a friend can be complicated, and she won't hold what Catra did against her. Glimmer and Bow accept Catra partly for saving Glimmer, and partly in support of Adora. In Season 5, Episodes 8 and 9, we see Catra slowly starting to fit in with the Best Friends squad, and she is trying to learn how to control her anger and not push people away. In Season 5, Episode 10, Return to the Fright Zone, Perfuma badgers Catra pretty hard about how she treated Scorpia. Catra does not argue back here, and she even tries to implement Perfuma's advice when Scorpia confronts her in the Fright Zone, which was absolutely horrible advice, by the way. As an aside, I think that this episode is really interesting. Perfuma thinks that love is the way to save Scorpia, and this partially works, as Scorpia misses her lightning shot, but Natasa, who has a very strong relationship with Spinnerella, does not hold back at all, as she respects Spinnerella enough to be able to take whatever she can throw at her, and consequently, Spinnerella is saved. Maybe there is a side message in here about the strength of respect combined with love, compared to just love. Anyways, in episodes 6 through 10, we see Catra put in a lot of work to try to better herself as a person, and we see that she feels guilt at how she has treated Scorpia and Entrapta. But she doesn't seem to care about the masses of people that the Horde was attacking. This is also why the arc does not seem to be a redemption arc. If this were a redemption arc, Catra would be motivated by the fact that she was hurting people as part of the war. By Season 5, Episode 11, Failsafe, the Adora-Catra Shadow-Weaver dynamic is back, allowing for Shadow-Weaver to try to drive a wedge between Adora and Catra. Adora chooses to sacrifice herself, and Catra sees this as siding with Shadow-Weaver, and as a sign that Adora does not love her as much as she loves Adora. So Catra leaves. But when she realizes what Horde Prime is doing to the planet, she goes back to try to save Adora. She gets Shadow-Weaver to take her to Adora, and eventually Shadow-Weaver sacrifices herself to save them both. It is at this point that Catra understands that what she is doing is not just for her or her friends, but for everyone on Etheria. It takes Shadow-Weaver, who is one of the more selfishly motivated characters in the story sacrificing herself, for Catra to realize this. If Catra's arc was a true redemption arc, this is what Catra should have realized earlier in Season 5, and what should have started off her redemption arc, as her motivation to change. But this is not a redemption arc. This realization ties in with the Catra-Dora love arc, as Catra is now able to understand Adora's motivation, always being willing to put others before herself. Catra still isn't thinking about the bad things that she has done in the Horde to the people of Etheria. She is understanding Adora's motivations, and she can understand now because she finally has enough of a safety net of friends built up over the latter half of Season 5 for her to think about more than just her own survival, and because of the shock of Shadow-Weaver's sacrifice. Catra can now start to consider what is best for people that she has no investment in. I think that by the end of the show, Catra has everything in place for her to consider what she was doing to the random innocents as part of the Horde. If the show were to continue, I think that we would have an interesting 6th season, where Catra has to face up to what she did, having the ability to feel guilty now, but knowing that what she did was necessary, and it would be hard to do things differently. I think that Adora and the other characters would have to help Catra come to terms with what she did in such a bad mental state, and it would be a chance for Adora in particular to learn how to empathize. This would probably play out more similar to a redemption arc, but it would still be different. Throughout the first 4 seasons of the show, Catra makes morally wrong decisions, but they are out of survival and justified because Catra can't be expected to think about what is best for others when she is struggling to survive more than any other character on the show. In Season 5, Catra changes because she wants to be better for herself and for her friends, but not because of the things that she did to the masses as part of the Horde. Catra's bad deeds were justified, and they don't require redemption, and Catra's change is not motivated by most of these bad deeds, and so does not follow a path of redemption. But if Catra's arc was not a redemption arc, then what does Catra's arc tell us? Catra reminds us that when you have no support, and you are just trying to survive, you can only think about taking care of yourself. We see that to prevent her destructive behavior in the first 4 seasons of the show, she would have needed support from others. Catra shows us that finding worth is important. There is something to gain from believing in yourself and accomplishing things. However, having self-worth doesn't mean anything if you don't have friendship. You need support from others on top of your self-worth. Catra shows us that it isn't enough to just care for someone. You have to be vulnerable enough to care for someone healthily and with good communication. This way, you don't hurt them, and they can help you. Catra shows us that people will look at you and judge you based on your actions, but only a few people will ever look into why you have made these actions. This makes Catra's arc very interesting. Catra's story goes through the steps that you need to be fulfilled as a person. Step 1. You need to have self-worth. Step 2. You need to have friends and support. Step 3. You need to be vulnerable with your friends so that you don't hurt them, and so that they can help you. Step 4. You have to understand your friends so that you know how you can best help them. Season 1 had Catra at Step 1. Seasons 2 through 4 had her fluctuating between Steps 1 and 2, and Season 5 had her making all the transitions. Catra makes the last transition when Shadow Weaver sacrifices herself. This shocks Catra into finally understanding Adora's perspective on doing things for something bigger than you or your small group. This is the reason why Catra-Adora is such a strong relationship. Both parties understand how the other operates and how they need to be supported. They are therefore stronger together. In the world of She-Ra, and in our own world, only your close friends are going to try to understand you so that they can best support you. In She-Ra, for the longest time, only Scorpia attempted to understand why Catra was the way that she was. And that is why Scorpia was so happy to see Catra again in Season 5. Scorpia left her mid-Season 4, but Scorpia is a good friend, and once she realized that Shadow Weaver was in Bright Moon, she instantly understood why Catra was pushing her away. In their Season 5 reunion, Scorpia is so happy to see Catra again. Over time, Adora also understood why Catra did all the things that she did in the earlier seasons. It takes Adora all the way until Season 5, Episode 11, Failsafe, to realize this, but it is clear that Adora understands when she sees Shadow Weaver and says, "You ruin people." Even the viewers of the show seem to forget about biology and the urge to survive, and they can't justify what Catra has done. This is why, above all else, Catra shows us that we have to fight hard to take control of our own story, and in doing so, we will eventually become better people. Most people aren't going to care about what your story is. They will look at your actions with hidden assumptions behind your motivation. Only Scorpia really cared about Catra's story for so long. But Catra was strong, and she drove almost all of the events in the show because of this, resulting in her becoming a better person. Throughout the show, Catra looked at her situation head-on and looked to better her position. Catra's story started with a decision made by Adora to leave the Horde. This left Catra's entire life in shambles, but Catra did not give up. She made a plan to gain self-worth and to gain respect from her superiors, thinking that this would make her happy. She started to develop friends in the latter half of Season 1 and in Season 2. She tried to connect with Shadow Weaver, but was betrayed, another thing beyond her control. But Catra took the lesson that Shadow Weaver gave her to heart and tried to shut out her friends in Season 4. This was not a good lesson, and ultimately a bad decision, but Catra did what she thought would be best for her. Eventually, Catra realizes that she needs friends, and that what she has been doing is not working. So in Season 5, Catra puts in the work to change herself. She deals with her anger, she learns how to be vulnerable, and eventually she can healthily care for Adora. Catra had many life-altering experiences throughout the show, but she always fought to do what she thought would be best for her. She never gave up on becoming the best version of herself. She strayed in the wrong direction, but she was always trying to grow, and the Catra that we see at the end of the show is far different than the Catra that we get in the first 3 episodes. In fact, if you look at Catra in any given season, she is very different from all the other seasons. Catra's story is one of unimaginable strength and self-drive. You can only be brave when you are afraid, and through almost constant fear, Catra shows bravery and internal strength as she pushes for positive change in her life. I think that being the driver of positive change in your life is a message that should be universally related to, and it is why Catra is one of my favorite characters of all time.